Hello and welcome to the latest video from UCSGuru.com. My name's Colin Lynch, and in this video we're going to be installing a HyperFlex version 3 cluster from scratch. HyperFlex has been out a little while now, but the version 3 code has literally just come out this week. So I've taken this opportunity of downloading it, and as luck would have it, we've just had a all-flash 6-node HyperFlex array delivered, which I'm going to install into our lab here. So I thought I'd take this opportunity of, while I'm installing it, I'd video and record the installation for prosperity, as I'm sure it'll come in handy for a lot of people who are looking to do the same. Okay, so if we have a look at what we're going to cover today. So I won't go too much into what is HyperFlex. I think we're probably all familiar with what hyperconvergence is, but in a very high level, we've all had lots of experience with converged infrastructures where you've got compute, networking, storage, virtualization, perhaps via different vendors, which are pre-packaged, but essentially still separate products. With all the interoperability and upgrade issues that generally go along with it. Generally in a converged infrastructure, those pain points are minimized, but they're still there. They're still there, and certainly come upgrading times, they're a little project in their own right to upgrade. Whereas hyperconverge basically collapses all those elements, the storage, the compute, the networking, all back into one tier again. So they're no longer into separate elements. So all the storage, all the networking, all your compute are all now compressed into one tier, so there's no interoperability issues, and they're generally nice little scalable Lego bricks that you just build as you go. So there's no big SAN array to purchase up front. You literally just pay as you grow. So essentially that's hyperconverged. They're generally very cost-effective points of entry. You can start small, grow big. They're generally not big fault-tolerant boxes as what we've been used to seeing, because hardware fails, we should expect it to fail. But applications these days are generally cloud native, i.e. the applications themselves should be fault-tolerant and not really necessarily relying on fault-tolerant hardware. So I guess that's HCI in a nutshell. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to do a from the ground up, build from scratch HyperFlex 3 cluster installation. I think in one of my previous HyperFlex videos I mentioned that Cisco have a fairly bold claim that they can get a HyperFlex cluster up and running within an hour. And I think I mentioned at the time I'd like to put that to the test. So this is it. Let's see how we go. But being fair or unfair to Cisco, whichever way we're doing it, I'm also going to include all the steps they don't normally include. So they don't normally include or show you the pre-configuration of the Cisco UCS infrastructure. They don't normally show you the download and deployment and configuration of the HyperFlex OVA installer. They don't normally show you the prerequisites for the networking, etc. So hopefully we'll keep them honest and see how long this stuff really does take. So let's have a look. So we're going to configure our UCS infrastructure again. This is all out of the box, newly racked kit, so there's no smoke and mirrors. What else we're going to do? Configure the UCS kit up. We'll download all the OVAs we need to download and deploy them, and then we'll run the HX platform installer, which is essentially the creating the cluster, and I think it's from that point on there that Cisco generally say you should have an up and running functional HyperFlex cluster within an hour. Right. Okay, so definitely first thing you want to do is read the installation guide for the version of HyperFlex you're installing. We're going to be installing version 3.0.1a today, which I think is currently the latest version out as of what's today, the 2nd of May. And along with that version of HyperFlex, there's obviously a list of compatible versions. So for the infrastructure I've got here, which is a UCS, we require 3.23a, the infrastructure C series and B series packages. obviously the UCS firmware infrastructure bundle for the Fabric Interconnects, the C series for the actual HyperFlex nodes themselves, and the B series for the compute only nodes, if you wish to add any. vCenter 603 or 60 update 3 and ESX 60 update 3 are the minimum vSphere versions required. So again, we'll just check we've got those. Then we'll download and deploy the HyperFlex OVA and create that, and then we'll create the HyperFlex cluster. A couple more prerequisites there. Make sure you've got your HyperFlex networks pre-created on your top of rack switch, and anywhere else in your network you may need them, and enable jumbo frames with an MT of 9216 on your network. You don't necessarily have to worry about enabling jumbo frames on the UCS kit, because the HyperFlex installer will do that for us. Similar to with the networks as well. All those HyperFlex networks we've mentioned there, again, they're automatically installed and configured on the UCS kit. Okay, so again, I've mentioned there, the main thing is just plan your implementation, plan your installation. So generally I'll create up a spreadsheet of what I'm intending to install, and all the information I'm going to be required during the course of the upgrade. So all my IP addresses, so for my IP addresses for my installer OVA, the IP addresses I'm going to assign to my HyperFlex nodes, in effect in this case my ESXi cluster nodes. You'll see there that you need 5 IP addresses for each node. So you've got 2 IP addresses that are part of the management network, 2 IP addresses that are part of the storage network, and a vMotion IP address. And then obviously any additional networks you may want to add in. If you want to see what those IP addresses actually equate to, if you have a look at this little diagram here, so you can see your UCS service profile for your HyperFlex node there. So it has 8 vNICs, 2 for each of the standard vSwitches that the HyperFlex installer will create, and you'll see that we have 3 VMKs, hypervisor addresses, 1 in management, 1 in storage, and 1 for vMotion. And then there's, for each node has a storage controller VM, which basically controls access to and from the shared software defined storage across the nodes. And that control VM has a leg in both the management vSwitch and the storage vSwitch, and requires an IP address. So all in all, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 IP addresses required per node. So again, knock up your spreadsheet. I'll make a copy of this spreadsheet available as a download from the post. So again, covers everything we need if you actually want to see it there. Oh, that's not the one. It is. That's the one. The HX worksheet. So it covers the HX cluster details. So you're going to need an IP address for the OVA installer, an actual IP address for the cluster itself, the storage cluster for the management and the storage. Then there's the 5 IP addresses we talked about, 2 of which are on the management network, 2 of which on the storage network. You'll see there it's the same network for both of those IP addresses. So it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 VLANs you're going to need initially. A management, a storage, a vMotion, and a VM data. So again, plan that accordingly. In this instance, I'm actually linking our HyperFlex cluster to an ACI fabric. So I've actually created those networks within the ACI infrastructure. So there's just some notes for me of the ACI elements I've created. But for the most part, you could be connecting this up to standard standalone Nexus 9K, or even any other vendors upstream network. You're going to need your vCenter details, so IP address and credentials of your vCenter, and the UCS cluster that we're going to install. In this case, this is a brand new HyperFlex cluster, so it actually comes with the Fabric Interconnects, which are currently at factory defaults sitting in the rack. And then obviously you'll need our DNS and NTP information. So again, first thing you want to do, create this spreadsheet and have it to hand. It will make the installation goes so much smoother. So rack your kit, that's the kit that we've got racked here. So you can see there we've got 6 nice all flash HX220 nodes, the 1U nodes. They're all flash because it has that nice little orange badge there as opposed to the hybrid blue badge. As you can see there on the right, apologies for my out of focus camera work, but you can see they're very minimalist cabling. These are all just 2 10 gig cables per node. There's no CIMC cabling required. These are all UCS manager managed. In fact, if you actually connected up the CIMCs, you'll probably find you'd have issues discovering your nodes. So you just want to leave UCS manager to do that. Those nodes, it's a little murky there, so there's a nice picture of how each of those nodes connect in. I've got data center OCD, so I'm always very regimented. I'll always connect my left hand ports to my Fabric A and my right hand ports to my Fabric B, and node 1 generally I'll go to port 1, node 2 to port 2, etc. And there's our 2 Fabric interconnects with our L1 L2 cluster links connected between them. That's the sort of big picture. So I've got the 6 HX nodes there, the 2 Fabric interconnects, and as you can see they're connected up into the ACI Fabric. My vCenter and my HX installer VM are on a vCenter in another part of the network. You could potentially deploy your vCenter within your HX cluster if you so wished. I'll leave a notes to there's a little caveat white paper on how to do that, because obviously you're in a little chicken and egg situation where you can't deploy your HX with your vCenter if your cluster's not up. But for the most part, I think most customers will probably have an external vCenter already, and they're just adding their HX node into the cluster. And similar to that OVA installer you can run on your laptop as part of VMware Workstation or Box or something like that, as long as it's got communication to your vCenter and your HX nodes. Okay, I think we have covered everything, and as I say, that's just a nice little diagram of how everything fits together. So we shall see how we go. Let's get this underway. I'm going to start a timer there. As I say, we'll time the whole thing. I generally try and keep these videos short-ish, only because my video player tends to get upset if these files run to any sort of great size. But I'm going to leave that timer going. And again, I generally zip about doing lots of tasks simultaneously, but in the interest of this video, I'll try and keep the tasks very contiguous, one after the other. So while that will take a bit longer, it will save a bit of confusion of me zipping around doing multiple things simultaneously. Right, so first things first, let's get UCS configured. Okay, so the UCS is all freshly racked. So we jump into the terminal server. So again, it's all brand new out of the box, but the Fabric interconnects are connected to a terminal server on their console ports. So I've had the luxury of driving home, and if all works out, I should be able to jump on them remotely. I'm a big fan of terminal servers, even though they seem to be a dying breed in data center these days. Okay, so so HX, UCS A and B. So hopefully these should be sitting at an install prompt. Oh, indeed they are. So let's configure this via console. We want to set up a new one. Set up a new Fabric interconnect, yes. Nope. Password for admin. It will be part of a cluster. This will be A. System name is HXUCS. We don't need to suffix the -A and -B. The system will do that for us automatically. Okay, so now we need to refer to our magic spreadsheet that we did very well and filled in ahead of time. Just find it. Okay, that's the one. Just shrink that down a wee bit. Okay, so this is our HyperFlex worksheet that we filled in with all the variables we're going to need throughout this install, and they're the ones we're going to need now. So UCS details, so it's 181 for the FIA, 182 for FIB, 180 for the cluster. So let's pop them in. 172.22.140.181 255.255.255.0. And gateway is 172.22.140.240. Okay. The cluster address is 172.22.140.180. Yeah, we'll put a DNS server in now, which is 172.22.180.101. Domain name is sdn.lab, or in fact sdnlab.com. Join a centralized environment, UCS Central, so no. Obviously also includes things like Intersite if you want cloud management. Okay, so we'll go for that, apply that configuration, and I always just like to do a continuous ping just to see when it comes back up. So that is .181. And we'll also do one to the cluster. 172.22.140.180. So okay, so FIA is already up. The cluster won't come up until it's formed a cluster with its subordinate. So let's do that now. So let's do a duplicate session there. There's HXUCSB. Hopefully that's in the same state. Yep. So we want configure by console. It's detected a presence of a peer, which is good. Always good. Continue, yes. We will join the cluster. The password for the cluster is okay, that's connected. So it should just ask us for the IP address of this FIB, which is 172.22.140.182. Go into our spreadsheet, and we shall say yes to that. So that should form the UCS cluster. As soon as that's up, the 180 address should become reachable. quickly check in on that by doing an admin. Doing a connect local management and show cluster state. Okay, okay, that has an election in process. So just give that a minute or so. You'll know when it sorts itself out, because that cluster address should start responding. This is when I'd normally jump off and start deploying an OVA somewhere, or the HyperFlex installer, but again, in the interests of keeping everything nicely contiguous, I shall resist the temptation, and we'll stick with one thing at a time. So we'll just get the UCS fully completed first. Okay, that should hopefully be about done, or nearly done. If we ever get to a nice boring part of the video, what I'll probably do is I'll leave the timer running, but I'll pause the video rather than bore you watching CDs load or progress bars. But trust me, you won't miss anything significant. If something doesn't work, I'll certainly leave that recording, and we'll resolve it together as we would in any real world scenario. I'm certainly not one for hiding anything that doesn't go to plan. Though I mean, in the real world, things sometimes don't go to plan. So you'll see it warts and all today. Hopefully there'll be no warts, but you know, we hope for the best but plan for the worst. So let's see how that's going. Oh, primary subordinate. So okay, so that should hopefully be about there. That ping should start responding very shortly. And there we go. Alright, so now we should be able to get rid of our console windows. And we should be able to fire up our web browser. Okay. So let's go to 172.22.140.180. Okay, that sounds like the cluster may not be completely up yet. Okay, that's better. Ooh, okay. So immediately notes there that we're running UCS Manager 3.23a, which, if I am correct, is actually the prerequisite version for the HyperFlex 3.0a. So yeah, UCS firmware 3.23a, so we won't have to upgrade the UCS, which is good. And we'll launch that. And boy, do you never get tired about seeing an HTML5 GUI after the years of Java hardship. Right, okay, so let's log in. if that wasn't the correct version of UCS, then we needed to do a UCS upgrade. What we would do is we'd just register the HX nodes with the controller just by enabling the server ports, and then we'd import our infrastructure bundle for the FIs, our B series bundle just in case we added in any compute only nodes, and our C series bundle for the HX nodes. As you're probably aware, with HyperFlex you can independently scale the compute and the storage. So if you've got enough storage but you just need some more horsepower, you can add in some rack mounts and blades which don't contribute any storage to the cluster but do contribute compute power. Okay, so as you can see there, we've got two Fabric interconnects. That's all we're seeing at the moment, and that's all we'd expect to see at this stage. So what we need to do first, I always like to configure our time. So let's go and specify our NTP server. And our NTP server is 172.22.140.101. It's actually an NTP service on our domain controller. Okay. And as a final little check, what I sometimes like to do is just check that that is in fact giving time. So I'll just use a little NTP checker. So let's do 172.22.140.101. Do a query. And yep, it's giving us time. So that's good. Okay, so we've done that. Let's go to our inventory. We can have a check our firmware. So we know, actually we just saw in the little banner in the front that we're running the correct version of firmware, 3.23a. And we can see there we've got our B series bundle, our C series bundle, and our infra bundle for the correct version. So we won't need to upgrade any UCS components, which is good. But again, if you did, this is now you'd do it. Okay, so let's first of all go and set up our uplinks from our Fabric interconnects. So if we have a quick look at our diagram. Our HyperFlex kit. So it's actually these connections we're going to do now. So from our Fabric interconnects, our uplinks into our ACI Fabric. Again, don't worry if you don't have a ACI Fabric. If you're uplinking to just a standard, standalone Nexus network or any other vendor network, it doesn't matter. But you should have pre-configured the networks you're going to need for HyperFlex up on those networks, which again you can get from the install guide. As you can see there, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 networks you need, and just allocate a subnet to each of them. Again, we'll have more of a chat on those when we get to the configuration. But for the most part, it's these links here we're going to configure. So as ever, I've got a bit of data center OCD, so I always like my ports nice and sort of ordered and nice mirrored across. So both my port 4s will go to my FIA, and both my port 5s go to my FIB. So let's configure that up. So ports 31, 32 are uplinks, and 1 to 6 are server ports down to the servers. Okay, so let's go to our LAN tab. Oh, in fact, we want infrastructure tab first. So you want Fabric interconnect A. So you can see there in that sort of pea green colour, it knows the Fabric interconnect knows that something's connected. So let's connect these as uplinks to our ACI. And configure these as our servers. Now again, I've connected node 1 to port 1, node 2 to port 2. So if we activate these in the order that our nodes are connected, they should get the right names. So if we activate port 1 as a server port, so UCS will allocate server 1, the name server 1, to our HX node 1 in our rack. So it's all nice and and ordered. So again, we'll do 2. Server port. It doesn't always work out. Sometimes it'll misdiscover or the timings won't quite be right, and you'll have to, but not to worry, we can always just change that at the end. So, but we always like to try and save ourselves a little bit of work by bringing them up in the order to which they're racked. So again, this isn't probably the fastest way of configuring up a UCS. Generally you do it with either an XML file or an API call, but as I mentioned in the start of this video, the point of this video is to not cut any corners, do all the manual steps, just so you get the full idea of all the steps involved. It's very easy just to say I've run this Python script or I've run this REST call and hey presto, it's all done, but obviously that doesn't really help you trying to see the process. Okay, so let's do subordinate FI. So again, 2 uplinks. Now the nodes have actually been given their server numbers. I've been discovered on server on Fabric and A. I can be a little more trigger happy on this side because the numbers have already been assigned. So I don't generally have to bring them up in the same order. Okay, so that should now kick off the discovery of the servers. So let's go and do the uplinks. So I've actually pre-configured the ACI fabric. So they're expecting some LACP port channels from the UCS. So as soon as these are configured, they should come up. So let's create a port channel. I'll call this to ACI fabric. We should find our uplinks. I've configured port 6 as an uplink. Okay, I shall rectify that in a minute, but we certainly don't want it connected to our fabric. So port channel in fabric B. So we'll call this ID 2 to ACI fabric. Oh, at least I've got those ports on FIB right. Okay, so let's just make sure, as I say, they're pre-configured on the ACI side, so they should pretty much come straight up. Let's check this one. That's up. Oh, operational speed 10 gig, so that should crank up to 20 gig as soon as, I guess, one of the links is still coming up. And okay, that's up, but again, the ports aren't completely up yet, so just give that a second. Okay, it looks like this one may be up, so that's up at 20 gig. And that's now up at 20 gig. Okay, so our port channels are up, that's good. Let's just go and rectify that port 6 on FIA, which okay, that's FIB. That's port 6, I think I've misconfigured, which should be a server port. Okay, so on that note, let's see how our servers are being discovered. Oh, we've got 6, that's a good sign. And as it discovers them, it will start filling in all these variables for the memory, adapters, CPU, etc. Let's just see if they're discovered in the right order. So as you can see there, UCS has called them server 1 to 6, but whether they are what I consider server 1 to 6 and how they are racked. Let's just do a quick compare to our rack diagram. So rack layout, so you can see there that node 1 is 3 PD, node 2, okay, so it is 2 VC, so that's incorrect. Okay, 3 is M4. Okay, so it's discovered 1 in the right order, but the rest wrong. Oh, 6 is right. Okay, but as I said, it's not a problem. So we just need to decommission the ones that are wrong. So, which is server 2. Go to server maintenance, do a decommission. Server 3 is wrong, that should be M4, so we'll decommission that one as well. And server 5, I think that's wrong as well. Yep. Oh. Decommission, and I think, are the others correct? So 1 is correct. 3, 1, 2, 3 is M4, so that is not correct. And 5. Okay, so just okay. I think 5 is already. So okay, so 1 and 6 were correct. PD and U9. Okay, and all the rest were wrong. So okay, so if we go and have a look in our decommissioned list now, we should see our servers sitting on the naughty bench. Okay, so there they are. Their current IDs and their serial numbers. So M4 should be server 3. So now I can just double click those numbers there, and now I can just change the IDs. So that should be 3. And V2C 1, 2, 3 should be 4. V3PE is 5. And VH is 2. Okay, so now let's recommission those boxes. So now we should see them pop back in here, but with their correct numbers. So we'll see that server 1 and 6 are still being discovered. The other 4 servers should pop in shortly. And again, while this discovery is going on, you'll probably see various errors popping up. But again, once the full discovery is gone, they should all zero out again. So again, this process will already take, I guess, 5 minutes maybe. So what I'll probably do is I'll leave the timer running, but I may just pause the video. Okay, so the other servers have popped in. I'll just do one final check on their serial numbers, because I know what a butterfingers I am. So server 1 to 6. So 1 should be PD. 2 should be VH, 3 should be M4, 4 should be 2C, 5 should be PE, and 6 is U9. Excellent, that's all good. So, but as you can imagine, it would be a little bit confusing if node 1 was called server 4, node 2 was called node 1, node 3 was called server 2. So yeah, so having everything nicely aligned in your data center all the way through certainly makes life a lot easier for everyone concerned. So again, those are just finishing off their discovery. You can see there it's now finished discovery on the 2 servers we didn't decommission, 1 and 6. So 20 cores, 262 gig of RAM. So they're now done, just finalizing the discovery. So again, we'll just pause for a sec while that finishes. So we're doing all right, 26 minutes in. Okay, so server 1 has now finished and has gone into the unassociated state. And so server 6, so the rest won't be far behind. And that's the state that we want all the servers to go into. So they're built, configured, but no service profile, so they don't have an identity yet. Okay, so we should be able to see our UCS infrastructure forming. So you can see our 6 nodes all are dual connected, so that's always a nice little cabling verification. And you see our server numbers there, so you can focus in on them if you wish. Okay, but that is essentially all the configuration we need to do on UCS. So for those of you who are familiar with the UCS, you'll notice that we haven't configured any networks or any VLANs because the installer will do that for us. We haven't installed any service profiles or templates or NIC templates, anything like that. That will all be configured for us. The only things we've needed to do is really acknowledge the servers or discover the servers and create our uplinks to the network. Because we've only got one set of uplinks from each FI, by default all VLANs will trunk up those uplinks. So again, nothing to do there. So again, UCS pretty much done. So we are now ready to go to the next stage, which is to deploy our HyperFlex installer OVA file. So for that, let's just pop back to our topology diagram a second. So if we have a look at our HyperFlex environment, so we've done our fabric interconnects now, we have discovered our 6 HX nodes. So now I'm about to deploy the HyperFlex installer OVA. So that's an OVA that you download from Cisco.com. I've probably got a link up here somewhere. In fact, let me just go and find it. Cisco.com. So I've already downloaded it, but I'll just show you where to go and find it. Where are we? Support. Downloads HyperFlex. Okay, that'll do. And then you just go and find the OVA. So the suggested release is 2.6. No, we want the new one, 3.0. So 3.01, and you'll find the there you go, the installer OVA. So again, it's almost 5 gigs. So it's fairly sizable. And while you're here, I'd certainly suggest that you also download the custom ESX image as well. You'll probably find that down in the related software. So you've got the custom image for ESXi 60 update 3. So I'll download both the ISO and the update bundle. You'll need the update bundle if your HX nodes were delivered with a previous version of ESX on them. You just need to do an upgrade. You just need that ISO CD there if you literally want to blow your node away and recreate it. It's not really recommended for upgrades. And then if you did need to upgrade your UCS infrastructure, again under the related software you'd see your infrastructure bundle, your C series bundle and your B series bundle. Okay, but as mentioned, I've already downloaded that 5 gig file. Haven't deployed it yet, so let's do that now. So let's go to our vCenter. So again, this vCenter is completely out of band. So this is just an external vCenter from the HyperFlex cluster and ACI environment. You can, if you so wished, install your vCenter on your HyperFlex cluster. But obviously, you're in a little chicken and egg, i.e., you can't register your HyperFlex cluster with a vCenter if the vCenter doesn't exist, and you can't deploy your vCenter because your cluster doesn't exist. So there is a little caveat white paper on how to do that. So essentially, you just pick one node, fire it up, and install vCenter directly on that node before you actually build your cluster. Okay, so let's just deploy our OVF template. So let's go and find make sure the right one. So yeah, we want the 3. Lots of good features with 3, so I won't go into them all now, but some nice features around node sizing, etc. But if you refer to a previous post I did on HyperFlex or Cisco Live Update, I think I covered a lot of the HyperFlex 3 nice features. Okay, so again, we'll just deploy this. I've created a nice little folder for the HyperFlex installer. Again, my data center OCD. We'll stick it in our nice big 2 terabyte data store there. And on our default network, and again that network, as long as it can see the vCenter. Right, so this is back to our spreadsheet again, because we've pre-recorded these results. So for our OVA installer, so I have our IP address, that's the default password that comes with the template, and things like our IP information. So let's put that in. So IP address is 172.22.140.170. Net mask is /24, so 255.255.255.0. Default gateway is 172.22.140.240. Our DNS is 172.22.140.101, and our NTP, which we've already tested, in fact it's the same as that. So again, NTP and DNS, very important that you have those configured ahead of time. So I've created DNS entries in for our installer, our HX nodes, our UCS, etc. So again, they're just standard DNSA records and the reverse PTR records. Okay, so do next for that. Power on after deployment, just verify that they are all okay, and say finish. So that will now deploy our VM, and we'll install the HyperFlex installer OVA. So this is basically a virtual appliance that has all the scripts and all the files and the wizards that will guide you through and will configure the whole HyperFlex cluster for you. So this will probably take, I'd guess, 10 minutes off the top of my head. So we see there, take a time check at 33 minutes. So I'll just pause the video and I shall wake it back up again as soon as that OVA has powered on. Okay, so that looks like it's just about coming to the end there. So we can see it's 99% deployed down the bottom. And we can do a little ping to it to see when it comes alive. Was that 170? Okay, there we can see it, Cisco HyperFlex installer. That should hopefully start responding to pings as soon as that initializes. Okay, there we go. So again, once that's done, we should be able to web browse over to it. And again, being a good boy, I've put that in DNS as well, so I've called it HyperFlex installer. So hxinstaller.lab.com. Could have just browsed to the IP address. Okay, and the default login is admin. Oh, I tell a lie, it's root. And the password is Cisco123 with a capital C. Cisco123. Accept the terms and log in. Okay, and that's what we'd expect to see. So you've got your select workflow, so create a cluster, expand your cluster, or if you know what you're doing, you can choose a custom workflow and dip in and out the workflow. But for the sake of this, we will do the create our cluster. Oop. Okay, so just before we kick off, we'll just make sure everything, our prerequisites are all in place. So let's have a look. So HyperFlex 3.0, we have that OVA installed. UCS firmware 3.2.3a for infrastructure with our C series and B series packages installed. vCenter 6.0.3 or 6.0 update 3. Let's go and confirm that. So I have installed a new vCenter, so it's not going to be this vCenter with dozens of clusters already on it. So I've created a nice new cluster which we'll use for the HyperFlex, but you could just as easily use your existing vCenter cluster, vCenter server. I think I've called it HXVCSA. Okay, and we'll go to port 5480, which is the appliance management appliance port of the vCenter, just so we can have a easy quick check of the settings. So root, and again, it's really just to check our time and our version. Now I just find it's a bit quicker testing it from the appliance, the management appliance. Okay, so time looks like it's good and is yep, we've got our NTP server and we are running 6.0 update 3, so that's good. And we can actually go to the actual vCenter itself. HX, so rather we don't just take that port off, I'll just go to the main vCenter screen and we should see a nice Virgin vCenter. So admin is, I don't know if I can spell this right if I type it really quick, administrator at vSphere.local. Okay, so let's just have a look. So hosts and clusters, we shouldn't see anything. Yep, so nothing at all. So no host deployed. Okay, so all zeros. Okay, let's just go and check back in on UCS. All our servers should now be discovered. And indeed, so all 6 servers fully discovered and in unassociated mode. So again, our last sets of prerequisites were configure the HyperFlex networks on the top of rack switch. So as mentioned, I'm running Cisco ACI fabric, so I've created those 4 networks and their respective gateways in the ACI fabric. I've enabled jumbled frames in the ACI fabric. We don't need to do that in UCS because again the installer will do that for us. So I think we are ready to run our OVA. So what are we? 40 minutes in, we've completely configured our UCS out of the box. We've discovered all our HX nodes, registered, connected to our vCenter and confirmed the prerequisites there. So I think we are all good to go. So let's browse to our installer. It is just create our data center in our vCenter. So we need somewhere to put this cluster, so let's do new data center. I will call it SDN Lab. Okay, so we've got a nice little home for our HX cluster as and when it gets deployed. Okay, alright, so now let's go back to our HyperFlex installer. So this really now where I think is where Cisco say you should have a working cluster in about an hour. So we're at what, 41 minutes, so we'll see how we go. But again, we're not doing this in the most optimized order, or we're not certainly doing it in the quickest way possible. We're taking our time, we're learning a bit as we go. So we want to create our cluster. We'll create a standard cluster, so you see you've got a couple of options there which are new in the version 3, which is the edge cluster, which is that little 3-node deployment where you don't need the FIs, and the stretched cluster, which is obviously if you've got parts of your cluster in one data center, parts in another data center. But we want our standard data center. So again, I mentioned I'm not doing this most cost-effective method because what I could have done is just have a pre-configured JSON file and drop it over there, and it fills it all in for me. But that's no fun. So again, the promise was that we'll walk through this manually. So this is where our spreadsheet comes in again. So we're going to need all our credentials for our vCenter, our UCS, etc. So again, we've made a note of them in this nice spreadsheet. So UCS manager hostname, okay, yeah, which is hxucs sdnlab.com. That is admin. Password was vCenter was, again we can use our IP address or our host name, so we'll do 172.1.22.140, and it was, I want to say was it 180? 183. 183. And our username admin is straight that'll do, at vSphere.local. Admin password is okay. What are we? Okay, hypervisor credentials. Okay, so by default they're root with Cisco 123, but it will ask us to change the password. So our new password, just make sure you adhere to the naming convention. It'll give you a little error if you're not. Okay, so I think we are ready to proceed. So you saw that I had a pre-configured JSON file. I'll show you how to generate that in a sec. So it's really handy, certainly if you're doing lots of similar um, installations, or if you wanted to prep the configuration for a client site before you arrived on site, you could just pre-configure all this in a JSON file and deploy it. Okay, so let's go continue. So you're going to walk through all these sections at the top there. So this should be our server section. So now it should be querying UCS Manager, and it should find all the unassociated servers. Okay, so there we go. So there's our 6 servers. Just for the hell of it, we're only going to put 4 in the cluster, because I'm going to save 2 to expand our cluster in a subsequent video. So I'm going to deselect 5 and 6. And again, if you weren't sure, you can actually use these little LEDs to flag and light up the servers if you want to be 100% sure you're talking about the right ones. But again, it's only going to show you servers with no association, so you're not going to break or repurpose any servers that you're already using. Okay, so we can continue there. So now it's just doing a check against our UCS firmware versions, which hopefully we are all in compliance of. Okay, so these are our networks that it's going to create within the UCS infrastructure. Again, I wouldn't change these names, so I've created these same networks in our upstream networks in our top of rack, along with its respective gateway. So again, these are our spreadsheet comes in handy. So we mentioned that each server gets 5 IP addresses in these networks. Okay, so again, just handy for your spreadsheet. And if you wanted a reminder of what these networks are, that's a nice little diagram from the install guide, which just shows you these 2 networks. So when the installer will actually create these 4 VLANs in UCS, and it will create a standard vSwitch in vCenter of the same name, and each vSwitch will get 2 port groups, one for the VMKs and the hypervisor, and one for the storage controller VM. So again, these are our 5 IP addresses: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 3 for VM kernels, and then 2 on each host for the storage controller VM, which does all the software-defined storage magic. Okay, so our VLAN ID for our in-band management is 310. Our VLAN ID for our storage traffic, H storage data, is 311. Our vMotion is 312. Our VLAN for VM network is 313. And again, you can add additional data networks as we go. In a future video, I'll probably be integrating this into both ACI and NSX. So again, when we're doing that, we'll definitely add a few more data networks. MAC pool, so this is a prefix of how you want to identify your HyperFlex hosts. So just took a couple of ones in there. This is our KVM, our IP list for our CIMCs of our nodes. So you want to create a nice little pool with enough blades. So we have 6 blades, so let's give ourselves a little pool there. And 255.set. And our gateway is the 140.240. And we don't need to worry about anything down there. Okay, org name. Okay, so this is the organization within the UCS manager it's going to create, so let's call it something nice like HyperFlex. Okay, think we are done on that tab. Okay. So okay, so these are our IP addresses now. Again, so back to our spreadsheet. So it's asking for these IP addresses. So it knows what network they're going to be on. So these are for our VM kernels, which is our management network. So the subnet mask will be 255.255.255.0. Gateway is 172.22.140.240. So what is quite nice now, if I tell a lie, that is 130. I should read my own spreadsheet. So these hypervisors are here, and the gateway, I've put the gateway as .254 as a bridge domain address in the ACI infrastructure. So it's 130.0 .0.10.254. So again, what is nice is if you put the first IP address in, so I can probably cut and paste it from up there. I do one, it will automatically, if I tick that little box, makes the IP addresses sequential. So again, if I type hx node 1, hx node 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, it makes life a little easier for you. Every little helps, as they say. And again, as we're filling in information here, this configuration window is building out. So again, I think we're done there. Okay, so now we need to put in the other IP addresses. So again, refer to our spreadsheet. So we've done this column here, so we're now going to need the storage controller addresses for the management subnet. And again, I normally just try and have a nice system. So as you can hear, I'm just adding 10. So we've got .1 and then .11 for host 1. Host 2 is 2 and 12, etc. And I do the same with the storage network. So 11.1 and 11.11. Again, we're not here to make life hard for ourselves. The more things we can make easy for ourselves, the better. So I can't cut and paste that, so let's just go 130.0.10.11, and that should autofill that and increment it. Hypervisor is 130.0.11.1. Will I get a sneaky cut and paste there? Yeah, I can. 11. Okay. So now this is the actual address of the storage cluster itself to manage that. So again, I've recorded that in our spreadsheet, and it should be on the same subnet as the this network, and then the data IP address should be on the same subnet as the data network. So again, that should be recorded in our spreadsheet. So I've got it there. So there's our cluster address and then our data address. So one on each of those networks. .130, and again, if you see where it's sort of aligned, it sort of tells you the subnet it's expecting. 100.100. And 11. And that's the same mask, 255.255.255.0. And the gateway is just the same with 254. we're moving along. So continue that. Okay, so now our cluster name, which I've called it HX Cluster 01. Replication factor. Okay, so we've got an option here of 2 and 3. So obviously production should be 3, which means that you've got 3 redundant copies of your data. It just means that you've got a third of your raw capacity available. 2 you could do in a lab or a test dev environment, which means you've only got 2 redundant copies of your data, i.e. so you can withstand less impact to the cluster before you potentially are into data loss territory or your data going read-only. But so we'll go 3. Our control VM admin password. Okay, vCenter data center name, which we've just created, SDN lab. Okay, cluster, it's pulled that from the above, so DNS is 172.22.140.101. NTP is actually the same box. Domain name is sdnlab.com. Time zone is London. Okay. Connected services, that would be things like call home, etc. We can do that afterwards. Advanced configuration. Tick that box, and then I think you'd only need that single sign-on if you was using external platform services controllers. If it was different, this is an embedded PSC with a vCenter, so we don't need that. And I think that is us all ready to click the big green button. Although just before we do that, I mentioned before that there's a nice way of generating that JSON file. So all this configuration information that you've entered here has been recorded in this pane. So you can use, I think, that little download button there, export configuration. It'll call your cluster name, and then you've got that JSON file ready for whenever you want to redeploy. You can edit it. If you want to read it, I generally use a nice JSON beautifier just to make it a little more readable. So when I put it, actually that was the one. So again, it just makes you look a nice little, easy to read. You can break it up, and if you needed to edit it and amend it for your next customer, obviously this is how you could do it. Again, these serial numbers and whatever you can always get from Cisco ahead of time. Okay, but without further ado, let's go back to our installer. I think we are pretty much good to go. Again, I'll do a final little check of all those settings. And let's click start. So we're on good time. So we've just spent an hour already just doing all the configuration prerequisites. So we are now ready to see how long our cluster takes to build. So again, what it will generally do is a big long list of validations first. So we can see they're logging into Cisco UCS. So we can sort of follow it through. So I go and have a look at UCS. So you can see there, servers all unassociated. Absolutely no organization, no service profiles, no VLANs, So again, pretty much nothing in UCS at the moment. All our errors are 0, which is always good. So it's now just validating it can log into the Fabric Interconnects. So it's doing all its pre-checks there. So that all looks good. Obviously green ticks are good. The servers it's discovered and that we've specified to be HX nodes in our cluster, it's obviously just doing some validation there. But bearing in mind that they were brand new out of the box HX nodes, I'd be surprised if it failed on any of that. And there's our 4 servers. Thanks to a big long list of validations. But all green so far, which is good. And you can see the workflow it's stepping through up there. So again, some of this can take a wee while, so if it does get too boring, I'll leave the timer going, but I'll just skip the video forward. Okay, so those was about 6 minutes of validations. I've got a nice big green tick, which is good. So it's now doing the UCS configuration. So this is when it'll be logging into the Fabric Interconnect, creating those 4 VLANs, creating the service profiles, associating them to the blades. So in fact, it gives you a little list there of what it's doing. So configuring the HyperFlex cluster. So it's creating that MAC pool we specified earlier with the 2 ones at the end. That's creating our adapter policies, our VNet templates. So again, we can probably watch a lot of this stuff happening. So let's have a look at our servers. So we have our HyperFlex organization now. Again, we didn't create that. No service profiles yet. Let's go and see what it's created anything on the network side. So our port channels that we created. Okay, you can see it's just created those VLANs. The VLANs we specified in the wizard. So the next main thing it will be doing is creating some service profiles. Again, no service profiles yet. How far they are down in the wizard. Looks like it's doing some validation actually on the servers themselves. Oh, okay, so there's some service profiles popping in now. So again, service profiles, and it's associating them with our rack servers. So again, this is the wizard driving all this. I'm not doing any of this. If we just refresh that, should see all our service profiles associating. Again, that normally takes a couple of minutes, so I should I'll leave the timer going, but just pause the video until they're all green. Okay, so it's been a few minutes, they're still associating. One thing I thought to do, I can leave a nice maybe continuous ping going, as we'll see when those hosts start to come online. What was it? Ping 130.0.10.1 was host 1. So we'll just leave that going. We'll check on that fellow every so often. So what's happening, those service profiles are associating. So once they're associated, all those hosts will reboot with their new identities, with their MAC addresses, their IP addresses, their VNet configuration. UCS Fabric interconnects, uplinks will send those VLANs up to the ACI Fabric, and I should start then seeing IP addresses being learnt on my actual top-of-rack switches. And then through those top-of-rack switches, it should be able to talk out to the vCenter, which is connected, as we said, on the other side of the ACI Fabric. So again, this is always a good time to grab a quick slurp of Diet Coke or whatever tipples your fancy. I've got a nice bottle of Shackleton malt whiskey downstairs, waiting for a nice interlude. Okay, so hopefully they'll be all associated in the next couple of minutes. So again, I'll just save you the boredom and I'll just pause the video. Okay, so stuff's happening. So they're now popping in associated. I'll leave that ping down a sec, so that's going to still be a few minutes off. Okay, so those servers are now associated. If I refresh that, I'm sure that pie chart will go green. Yep. Let's check in on our installer, find out how it's getting along. So I think it must be pretty much done with the UCS Manager configuration. Yeah, all green ticks, which is good. So again, it's about, what did we kick this off, just on the hour mark-ish, wasn't it? So we're about, what, 19 minutes odd into the HyperFlex installer configuration. So those blades will be rebooting now. Again, if we're that way inclined, we could probably just have a look on the KVM. Oh, in fact, why not? Shall we do that? Shall we do that? Let's just have a look at one of those blades. We should be able to KVM it now. It should have a CIMC address. So I'll probably see this blade should be either booting or would have booted up with ESXi with the VM kernel address we'd given it. Just nice to see what the installer's doing behind the scenes. Okay, so that blade's still booting. So what our installer's doing, yeah, so I think it's just finalising, waiting for those blades to come online. The thing about blades these days, got so much memory, they do take a wee while to go through their post and power up. if I remember correctly, this was blade 1, which I think was 130.0.10.1, I think, for its VM kernel. Okay, that looks like it's just finalizing its boot. I wonder when that comes online, because I probably will start seeing. Hey, there you go. Ping comes online. So that's telling me that my jump box, which is actually again outside of the ACI fabric, is pinging all the way through the ACI fabric down into the HyperFlex nodes. So again, just for curiosity's sake, I can actually probably log into my ACI fabric, to my APIC. Which I've recently just downgraded to 2 code just for another customer's POC. So back to seeing this, the old logo again. So let's just log in. So I've created a cluster for HyperFlex. So again, this is going slightly off topic, but it's always good to just check. So I've created a tenant called HyperFlex, just to keep it separate from what else is going on. And again, so if you want to see it, it's really straightforward. Those 4 networks we created, so I've called them the same name as what the installer calls them, just for ease. And then I've created an application profile, which is essentially a our group of VLANs. So, but these essentially would just be your VLANs within your network, and I'm advertising our ESX subnet, our management subnet, out through some layer 3 external connections into our router, out into our wider world, which is how my jump box can talk to it. But anyway, we digress. Getting through a little bit of ACI there. Right, let's see how our... Oh, I was actually going to show you the MAC addresses and IP addresses being learnt in those EPGs, isn't it? But we shall leave that for another day. Okay, so HyperFlex installer, how are we doing? Okay, so now on to hypervisor configuration. Let's go and have a look at our vCenter. Oh, that's the management appliance of it. So let's see if we've got anything in there yet. Nope. So we should hopefully see some tasks kicking off in vCenter at some point. Preparing ESXi host for installation. So again, what are we? About 25 minutes in. So as you can see, this, I haven't touched a button in what, probably 25 minutes. So this is the beauty of this sort of automation workflow that the HyperFlex installer does for you. Definitely, good opportunities for you guys to grab your tea if you was doing this. It's nice to watch. It's nice actually to watch it go through, and I certainly like learning about what it's doing by just following it around the various element managers and seeing what it's doing. So let's see what we've got there. Anything yet? Okay, so no tasks have kicked off yet, so I'm sure it's still preparing. Probably just check those other nodes. So it was 2, 3 and 4, wasn't it? 2, 3 and 4. So looks like all our ESX blades have booted. Oh, we're now into deploy stage. So okay, again, this will probably take 5 or 6 minutes. So again, won't bore you with watching that little whirly deploy light, so I shall pause the video again. So right now, as you can see, the installer is configuring the storage nodes, so it's deployed the storage controller VM. So that's that VM that sits on each ESX host and controls the software-defined storage element of the cluster. And one thing I guess worth pointing out as well is that you can see there it's doing all nodes simultaneously. So it's not doing like one then waiting doing the other. So in theory this should take the same amount of time whether you've got one node or 32 nodes. And with the 3 code you can currently go up to a 64 node cluster, which is 32 unified nodes and then or conversion nodes, and then the same number 32 of the compute only nodes. Okay, so now it looks like it's moved on. Installing software packages on controller VM. Okay. Again, so just while that's still deploying the controller, oh, sounds like succeeded. Okay, so just finishing off. Configuring HA and DRS. Okay, that's next on the menu. Okay, so that looks like it's done the storage VM. So that's doing some more validations. Oh, a lot of stuff has kicked off in vCenter, as you can see here. That looks like it's created a cluster. Let's have a look. Okay, maybe I just need to refresh that. Oh yeah, there's our cluster. Oh, and there's our nodes, our 4 storage VMs. Again, it's not the most interesting thing in the world, just watching this workflow. So again, I like to zip around just see what it's doing behind the scenes. So I'm sure it's probably creating the networking on these nodes. So again, it creates 4 standard vSwitches, which you can probably have a look at here. Not sure if it's created them yet. Oh yes, it has. So there you go, you can see what it's created there. So our management, our storage, and there will be a vMotion one to be created as well. So you can see there are the 2 port groups for each of those networks. One for the hypervisor with the VM kernel port, and then one for the storage controller VM. And that virtual machine there, which is in that port group, and that port group will actually be that fella over there. So you can actually maximize that and have a look. PD, it's actually that fella. So it's obviously host 1. Okay, let's see how our installer is doing. Again, just more validations, and I shall pause the video until there's something happens. Okay, some more green tick boxes just appeared, so it's mainly around the vCenter SSO, vCenter reachability. So it's just again just doing some validation checks of all the nodes it's just built. So you can okay, cluster creation. So now it's actually creating the storage cluster. Which is in effect the sort of the virtual IP address that you log into and actually manage the cluster by. Okay, so now it's just configuring our variables on the hosts. Okay, looks like it's just finishing off updating the cluster. Okay, that looks like it's complete. So we've got to this stage so where our cluster is now online in a healthy state. A nice little summary tab, and we are being asked to launch HyperFlex Connect, which is basically our interface into the cluster. So what was that? That was 49 minutes. So 49 minutes from starting, kicking off the wizard to our HyperFlex cluster being completed and built. So we've got a few little tasks just to finish off, which is there's a post install script which basically enables things like DRS and HA on the cluster. So we'll probably see it's turned off at the moment. So again, I won't do that manually. Actually, I'll just let this. Yeah. So the script, I'll let the post install script do that. And similarly, we'll create a data store. Let's have a quick look here. Yeah. So there's no data store in our shared storage at the moment. So that'll be a post deployment task, which we'll do now. Okay. Let's just go back. Okay, so now our cluster is built. Just before we do the post installation scripts, let's just have a quick look around the environment. So a couple of things we can do. We can either launch HyperFlex Connect from our installer VM, which will just show us a little bit of the overview of the environment. So, so alarms, events. You can also configure things like your data stores here, etc. Basically view your whole HyperFlex environment, upgrades, various data stores. By default there's no data stores, so you could create a data store, which we'll do in a few secs. Your live performance, so again your dashboard's quite nice, shows you all your key attributes. You can also see a lot of this information and manage a lot of this information through the vSphere web client. So if we go into our vCenter inventory lists, and we see down there Cisco HyperFlex systems, we can go in there and see a lot of the stuff we can see through the HyperFlex Connect. So we can see we've got 4 nodes, 6.43 terabytes of usable storage, because we're running a replication factor of 3, so it's basically a third of our available storage. And again, we can have a look around. So data stores, again, we can create a data store here. Have a look at our cluster. So yeah, all your key statistics. Okay, so as per the installation guide, and again this is something you want to definitely have close to hand and be following this through. So once you've deployed your cluster, there's a section in the installation guide called post-cluster configuration tasks. So basically it gets you to things like run the post-cluster configuration script, create your data stores, change your passwords of the ESXi hosts and the storage control VMs, etc. And various other little housekeeping tasks. Activate Smart Call Home, set your heartbeat up for high availability. So definitely worth going through those one by one. We'll do the main ones here. So first thing we're going to do is do the post installation script. So a couple of ways we can do that. We can either SSH to the installer VM, or we can SSH to it over the web. So if we do 172.170, wasn't it? 70, I think it is /mssh. There we go. So we got again, if that doesn't work for you, you can just do use your PuTTY or whatever your SSH client of choice is. So the script we need to run is post _ install and hit return. So this will basically do a lot of the housekeeping for us. So I put our root password in there. So we'll do the vSphere licensing separately. Do we want to enable HANDRS? Yes, we do. Those vSphere licenses, you can either order the HX nodes pre-installed with the licensing, or you can just use your standard vSphere licensing, which is what I'll add on afterwards. Disable the SSH warning. Yes, we will. Add vMotion interface. Yes. Netmask for vMotion is 255.255.255.0. So I'll grab our spreadsheet out again. So our vMotion interface, I want to say 314 was it? vMotion 312. So it's 312 and it was 10.0.12. So 312. vMotion IP for node 1 is 1. 30.0.12.1. Okay, v.2. You can just use your up arrow and incrementally do that. 3 and 4. And again, if I was to have a look in the web client behind the scenes, I'd probably see some tasks getting kicked off here. So add vNex, for that's the virtual vMotion, etc. Add VM network VLANs. Okay, we can do that either manually or we can do it here. So we did have one, which was our VLAN UCS manager password. I've called this VM data. So this will be VLAN 313, and this will be just for your general VMs. But again, you can create as many of these as you like, either through the wizard or you can do it the regular way through the element managers. Just bear in mind that through the element managers you do have to do things like make sure you do it on the UCS, etc. So they're doing it through this install script does save you a couple of jobs. Do you want to add any more data VLANs? So we'll say no for now. Okay, so this is our ESXi root password. Okay, that is all good. So bear in mind that root password is the one I think we changed it to during the install script. Okay, and that is it. That's our post install script done. So we can just exit out of that. So now let's just go and create a data store. So obviously we have a choice. We can either do it through the HyperFlex Connect, or we can do it through the vSphere web plugin. So we'll just use the web plugin as we're already there. Okay, we'll go new data store, and we'll create again, for HA purposes you probably want a couple of data stores, so we'll just say data store 1. We do imaginative for the names. Okay, that has a couple of terabytes. We'll go 2000 gig, or I'll just put 2 and change it to TB. I'll create another one. Wait for it to catch up, and I'll call this data. As my mouse decides to catch up. Oh, there we go. Data store 2. Okay, and that should jump in. That's so just wait for the GUI to catch up with data store 2. So this data store is obviously now distributed across all hosts in the cluster. Obviously that's mainly one of the points of hyperconverged, that is distributed across. Okay, so we can pop back and see if that our hosts see all them data stores. Yep, which they do. So data store 1 and 2 is now online. What else we want to do? Okay, so another post install task is just to redirect logging to a syslog server, which is all best practice. So again, that's probably one of those amber triangles. Yeah, okay, so system logs. Okay, so we can redirect our logs. So the way we want to do that is, again, if you have a look at the install guide, there is a little command script which I've copied here. So it's just a line just to redirect all your syslogs to a logging server. So I've got a VRealize login site instance. So I'm going to redirect all my syslogs there. So I'm going to just copy that to my clipboard. And I'm going to just SSH into each of my hosts in turn, which are, I can't remember what I called them on the DNS names, but I can remember their IP addresses, which was 172, don't know, it wasn't, it was 130.0.10.1 through to 4. So should be able to go in as root. And a quick right click and accept. Do the next one. One's 130.0.10.2. And right click. Two more to go. 130.0.10.3. So again, I'm sure you can think of far more intelligent ways of doing this than just, yeah, I mean, for hosts it's not a big problem. Any more than this, you probably want to use Power CLI or something like that. Where are we? Root. And then last one. If I can remember my DNS names, I think it was hxnode4.sdnlab.com. Is that right? Yeah, there we go. I'll remember the DNS names right. Okay, and it was root sdno. Okay, last one. Okay, so it should all be all my syslogs redirected. We can do a quick check. So we should be logging. So if I go to my login site instance, hopefully should start seeing some logs from my notes. Oh, just realised I didn't restart my timer, but that was only since the post install script, so what's that, about 15 minutes ago, something like that. Okay, so interactive analytics, this is like real-time logging. Let's just have a, and it was HX node. Okay, so I'm seeing logs for all of those. So, okay, good. So all my HX nodes are now logging. Okay, so I can get rid of that. Okay, there is probably a few more cleanup tasks I can probably think of, things like the heartbeat, but you know the rest are just sort of minor ones really. So again, just go through all the post deployment tasks in the user guide. So what's that been? Probably just over 2 hours, and that's included all the infrastructure stuff. So the base configuration of UCS and the full HyperFlex deployment. So I think we started the actual cluster build at just over an hour. So it's been about, well, it's certainly been an hour. So I'd say, you know, Cisco are true to their word that you can have a complete hyper-converged system completely configured, up and running and ready for workloads within an hour. So thanks very much for watching this video, and I hope you found it useful. As ever, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments or hit me up on Twitter at UCS Guru, and I'll do my best to answer them. So until next time, look after that data center of yours and take care.